honored to open up this session to what I know will be a very rich and interesting discussion. And frankly, I was having a hard time pulling myself away from our initial discussion out in the lobby. But we are very honored to have our panelists here today. My job is to do a brief introduction. I want to say a special thank you to David, who does not need an introduction, but if he will permit me to give a brief introduction.
Please give an introduction.
And I must say, while I have always held him in very high regard, as everyone knows, yesterday was Mother's Day, and first thing he said to me was he had a wonderful Mother's Day yesterday, so I hold you in even higher regard. As we know, David is an esteemed and highly regarded columnist for a number of prestigious publications, among them Thomson Reuters and The Atlantic. As you know, we do a lot with The Atlantic magazine, and soon we'll be doing the Aspen Ideas Festival, in which I'm privileged to be working on a week of Middle East programming this summer. David is also a two-time winner of the Pulitzer Prize and a former reporter for the New York Times. And as you know, he's recently released a book, Beyond War, Reimagining American Influence in a New Middle East. His book and recent article in the New York Times calling attention to the urgency of startup diplomacy are particularly timely for today's discussion. Here at the Aspen Institute, as many of you know, we house the Secretariat for Partners for a New Beginning, a public-private partnership that connects regional and U.S. business leaders to advance economic opportunity in 10 countries. In particular, one of the countries we're focusing on today is Tunisia. Our primary focus is entrepreneurship, education, innovation, and we focus on these subject areas through convenings, connecting, and catalyzing a network of global leaders. And earlier we were discussing the opportunity we had to meet with Secretary Kerry a week ago, and it was quite an interesting opportunity in which he convened our PNB Public-Private Partnership Steering Committee, which is chaired by former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, Walter Isaacson, the President and CEO here at the Aspen Institute, who is deeply committed to these issues, and Muhtar Kent, the CEO of the Coca-Cola Company, among other prestigious members of both civil society and the business community, to advance these issues and to advance them in a way that creates investment opportunities and job creation on the ground. What was clear to all of us in the time that we had together with the Secretary, and as you have read in many of his public remarks over the last 2 months of his very early tenure, is that he's focusing a great deal on economic diplomacy and advancing the tools of economic diplomacy in terms of the effectiveness of 21st century statecraft. And David, I am struck by how you in your writings have drawn attention to the importance of strengthening our government institutions to advance those interests. And I believe very strongly that public-private partnerships are a paradigm shift, and they're more important than ever in the context of 21st century diplomacy. We all can use these public-private partnerships more effectively to advance both resource management, to advance opportunities to shift away from what has been traditionally more trade, not to investment opportunities. And I think that those are new tools for diplomacy, and I'll be anxious to hear your thoughts. In that regard, I'm very pleased that we have, and I would like to particularly welcome Ziad Osladi from Tunisia. Ziad reminds us of the importance of Tunisia, and not only is Tunisia important because of what it represents, but it represents the beginning of the Arab Revolution, and it spawned a huge change. But Ziad represents, and he, in the context of not only his tenure as chairman and CEO of Tuninvest and Africa Invest, but his the work he's doing as vice chair of the local chapter of our Partnership for New Beginning in Tunisia. It is, he has invested time, energy, and the most extraordinary thought leadership. And it is important as we look at where we go in the context of Tunisia, the region, and looking and thinking outside the box. So with that, I would like to, I think Vanessa has asked me to remind everybody that, and I'm trying to remember Vanessa, hashtag Tuninvest is hashtag, I knew I would get it wrong, hashtag Invest Tunisia, and so forgive me, and but I hope that everyone will engage and actively participate. We are very much looking forward to this discussion. So David, over to you, and welcome to introduce the rest of our panelists.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'm the newcomer here in terms of economics. I'll be honest with you. I was a foreign correspondent for many years for the New York Times and spent most of my time in Afghanistan and Pakistan, a little bit in Iraq. Just quickly, the book Tony mentioned is sort of my realization while watching this, the $1.2 trillion that the United States spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, realizing that what I've seen in other countries is just the same in the Middle East. It's all about jobs and economics. And I kind of call for in my book the same thing, entrepreneurship, public-private partnerships, but I'm not an expert on how you actually do that. I traveled with Secretary Kerry this week on his trip to Moscow and Rome, which was interesting. That's more traditional diplomacy, but I'm very eager to hear from all the panelists. Daniela Grassani is the Deputy Director at the IMF for the Middle East and Central Asia. She will know, again, much more about the region than I would. Ziad has already been introduced. Tom Speechley is a partner at Abraj Capital. It's a much larger investment firm. I think he can give us a great perspective on what kind of investments actually interest them. One thing that I noticed was, and one question I have, which we'll get to later, is, is there a legitimate market in a small country like Tunisia for large Western investors? And he can talk to that. And Don, is it Diamasis? Diamasis, sorry. The Vice President General Counsel at OPIC is here, which has made huge efforts, I think, in Tunisia and Egypt and across the region to try to, create the private sector investment, that people in the region want, and I think is a much smarter use of money to get economies going there. Anyway, enough rambling. I want to start with Ziad, who just arrived on Saturday from Tunis. And I don't know if you can just give us sort of an overview of the current political and economic climate in Tunisia, how people are feeling about the situation these days.
Sure. Thank you, David. I would like maybe to start first by thanking Tony, Vanessa, and the Aspen Institute for this opportunity. I think when Vanessa asked me whether I would like to attend such a gathering, I said yes, on the spot, because whatever would bring Tunisia on the spot and provide some visibility to Tunisia, I'm for it. And we as a team here, I have my colleague Khaled, who also is from African Invest, Tuninvest. We're very keen, to be part of the story, and especially to be part of the new beginning for Tunisia also. And we're hoping, and we're very optimistic about the future of Tunisia. Let me start first by answering and giving, maybe a brief about the situation in Tunisia. After 2 years, almost 2 years now, we've seen a lot of things in Tunisia. Things have been lagging, dragging, but overall, things are going in the right direction. What we've seen, I think, on October 23rd, the election that took place on October 23rd, 2011, was really first a new beginning for Tunisia in terms of transparent elections that brought to power, I mean, the main parties who are running the country today. To tell you the truth, I mean, that election, I mean, was there to elect a parliament that was supposed to draft a constitution, a new constitution. The constitution was supposed to be drafted in 1 year. It has been longer than that now, much more than a year, I mean, a year and a half. Hopefully, I mean, it will be done by the summer. I mean, there will be a first draft coming. There was already a first draft coming out 2 or 3 weeks earlier. So now they're discussing and debating, and hopefully will end up with a new constitution that I would say will please most of the Tunisians. It won't be pleasing all the Tunisians, but most of them. And we're quite optimistic that we will reach that level. On the other side, I mean, on the economic side, and as David pointed out, I mean, the main reason behind the revolution that took place in Tunisia was mainly, I mean, the lack of jobs for the young people. And Tunisia has maybe it's a different story from the other countries, and like Egypt or the others, is that, I mean, these unemployed population, most of it is educated and has degrees, and some of them, and many of them have even university degrees, but they couldn't and cannot find jobs. So all that, I mean, led to this revolution. Since then, nothing has been done on that side, actually. I mean, things have even deteriorated on the economic side. I mean, we're hopeful that things will go very quickly, but I think we were dreaming, because after such many years, I would say, of dictatorship, I mean, it's not very easy. I mean, to go from one situation to another situation in few months or 2 or 3 years. Things will have been taken much longer than we thought, and people who I met with just after the revolution, I mean, told me that it's going to be taken longer than 1, 2, or 3 years, and the average that was mentioned to me was 5 years. I mean, that's what it took countries like Indonesia, like Portugal, etc. So, but the good news is that now, I mean, those parties and either, I mean, the leading party or the opposition are learning to live together, to listen to each other, because it wasn't the case when just after the elections, and they have also begun to put the economy as one of their priority, because it wasn't the case. And we're seeing a lot of new improvements in the country. Actually, security is back, which is a very good news, because it wasn't there after the revolution. And if I look at the companies that we have in our portfolio company, we're private equity investors, most of them have been very much resilient. And I would say, I mean, further to the demand from the local market, but also from the export market, and mainly countries like Libya. So we have benefited somehow, I mean, with what happened in Libya economically, since many of the companies were exporting to Libya, and the demand was quite strong from that country where everything has been destroyed. So what is next? I mean, so the constitution hopefully will be agreed within the parliament. Then we will have to agree also on the type of regime that we'll be having. It's going to be like in between a parliamentary and a presidential regime. That's the type of government that we should be having after the next elections, and hopefully the election will take place either by the end of the year. People are saying by the end of the year, but I think it's going to take longer, or the first quarter or second quarter of 2014. So everybody is looking forward for that, and I think as long as those elections haven't taken place, I mean, things will not start really as they should, given, I mean, the uncertainty on the political side. So that's in a nutshell, I mean, where we are. And I mean, the U.S. and the State Department has been very, I think, on the spot. I mean, after the revolution, I mean, a lot of, we've on our side as a PNB, NAPEO, member of the Tunisian board. I mean, we've received a lot of people that came that were very supportive, and hopefully that momentum will stay for the coming months.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to hear optimism coming from Tunisia. I'm just going to move down the line here. Daniela, can you talk about, I guess, how the IMF views the Tunisian economy in macroeconomic terms? And I'm also curious how it compares its prospect compared to other countries in the region. Again, it's been a slow transition. I think a lot of ups and downs, but I'm just curious what you think of how the country's doing and then how it compares to others.
Very good. First of all, let me also thank the opportunity to be here with such well-informed and outstanding colleagues that I hope this session will give me an opportunity to bring back to the IMF a lot of more ideas than I can contribute to the discussion. But to try to answer the question that's been posed to me, the economy in Tunisia, the way we see it, is that it's improving. The economy was hit very badly in 2011 and has recovered in 2012, and it's continuing to recover this year. To a large extent, this is still leaving a gap in the potential of the economy, so there is room for faster growth and further growth. There are, of course, a number of risks. We have heard about some from Ziad that has spoken about the political transition, which of course has implication for investors' confidence, and this clearly is still affecting the level of investment in the countries, both domestic investment and foreign investment. And there are, of course, additional risks from the world economy, which is not doing very well yet. And Tunisia is historically a country that's been very dependent on one market, which is Europe, both for tourism and remittances, but also for their exports. And so the risks to the recovery of Tunisia, I think, are also coming from the international situation, especially in Europe. Now, in terms of the options that Tunisia is exploring and to some extent advancing on at this point is really in the areas that we are debating here today. I think there is a recognition in Tunisia that the private sector is the answer, needs to be the answer to the challenges that, again, Ziad mentioned, the large unemployment, the fact that the workforce is well educated and yet opportunities do not, and skills don't really match one another. The need to create an environment that's more welcoming to both domestic and foreign investors, and it's also more even. Tunisia has inherited an investment regime that's quite different between the so-called onshore and offshore sector. And that has created a number of continuing challenges between the coastal areas and the interior, between industries that are very export-oriented but rather low value added, and industries that instead have had difficulties developing because of overregulation, heavy taxation, and government intervention. So as this recovery is unfolding, there are opportunities and options for Tunisia to cut across some of these difficulties inherited from the past and create a different environment for the private sector for a solid and sustainable recovery.
And just Tunisia compared to other countries, I mean, the criticism is that it's a very small market, to be blunt.
Yeah. If you want to compare Tunisia to the other Arab Spring countries, of course the other so-called Arab Spring countries are quite different from Tunisia. You have, on the one end of the spectrum, Libya, which is a very wealthy country in terms of its natural resource endowment. And on the other side of the spectrum, you have Yemen, which has also endured a real revolution. And it's the poorest country in the region in terms of per capita income. You also have two countries, Morocco and Jordan, where the revolution, or the spring, let's call it, has been really an internal evolution, not really a revolution, and where therefore some of the challenges that Tunisia has in terms of its own political transition are less constraining. And then you have Egypt, of course, where I don't know that anybody at this particular, certainly not me, at this particular point in time can really make a prediction. Again, a large market, an economy with vast potential, with inherited distortion from the past, large unemployment, and a lot of demand from different segments of the populations that have not been well served by the economy or the political system in the past. So it's a very difficult question, the one you ask me, because of the different across countries. But let me just say one thing. If what motivates the question is concern over the size of Tunisia, I'm actually not concerned about the size of Tunisia. Tunisia is a small market, so it's not a market that's, unlike Egypt, is ever going to attract industry that are solely focused on the local economy. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because Tunisia, as an open trade regime, has always been very much directed towards Europe and trading with other countries. And I think its size may actually make it easier to reach the kind of political consensus that is necessary for it to move forward. So not a political obstacle, not an economic obstacle, perhaps a political advantage, but that's where I'm not an expert.
That's fantastic. And I want to apologize, and this is my mistake, blame the journalist here. I want to recognize the new Tunisian ambassador here in Washington, Mokhtar Chaouchi. Thank you very much for joining us here today. I apologize for that. Moving on down the panel, Tom, we were talking earlier, and I was happy to hear this just before the panel started, that actually Tunisia is an increasingly attractive destination in terms of private sector investment. If you could talk about that a bit.
To be honest, it always has been. Talking about its size, it's always punched well above its weight. And let's just dwell on its size for a minute. It's 10 million people. It's got a GDP of about 40 plus billion, which is GDP per capita of over 4,000, which actually ranks it ahead of most of its competitors, not just in North Africa, but also in the entirety of Africa, with the exception of South Africa. So it's been doing pretty well on some measure. And there's good reason for that, because Tunisia has always had a reasonable pro-business outlook, even under the old regime. It was pro-business, yes, it had its own interests, but it was pro-business. And so you've got businesses flourishing there that we chose to invest in. And we still invest. We've invested 3 times since the Arab Spring. The first time was 2 months after that happened. We paused, looked at it. We were investing in a pharmaceutical production facility, and there's plenty of production in Tunisia. We paused, looked at it, and decided on a basket of risks and rewards, we'd still invest. And just to step back, I mean, before you think that we're just interested in tough-to-go places, we're happy to invest in tough-to-go places. We've not invested in Afghanistan and Iraq, to your experience, but we have invested in Pakistan, and we've invested all over the world. Colombia, Peru, China, India, all over. $7.5 billion so far we manage. Why are we interested in Tunisia, and what do we see the risks and rewards? And I always think of us, we're not really investors, we're risk managers. In theory, any risk is worth taking at the right price. And any asset you have is for sale at the right price. It's a bit cutthroat like that. We invest for profit. We want to buy well and sell well. And there's great opportunity in Tunisia. We've invested recently in the confectionery space. This is a company that produces single package muffins. It literally cannot make enough of them. Okay? And why is that? Because in Tunisia there's lots of consumers. And the whole country is going through, like a lot of the countries in Africa and our part of the world, it's going through a change in the way people buy and consume products. Modern retail is happening for the first time. You'll see malls, etc. People want product on the shelf in the morning. So a company that produces muffins is doing well. So we're putting money in so it can build another factory so it can sell even more muffins. And it might be plastics. We've invested in a plastics company recently that sells mostly to Europe. It puts harnesses on the cabling inside cars for the big European car producers. Tunisia, I think, is a bit like, and in the context of the revolution, it's worth viewing it a bit like Eastern Europe after the fall of the Berlin Wall. You've got Europe on its doorstep. You've got cost-competitive production. It's a natural supply chain partner for European companies. And provided that the business community, so the business environment created by the government is there, you will see companies grow. So for us, we want to invest in a company that's profitable, that can be more profitable. It's more or less simple as that, and we price accordingly. So without being too bullish on everything that's going on in Tunisia, it's definitely a place you can invest profitably. The issue is with the difference between perception and reality. If you turn on CNN, your immediate perception of Tunisia is a place that you desperately don't want to go and you desperately don't want to invest in. But is that necessarily the case? Is the CNN view the real view? And of course it's not. And Ziad's far too modest, but his company, his investment company and private equity firm, has invested dozens of times incredibly profitably in Tunisia. It's a place you can invest. And it's overcoming the perception that it's too difficult a place to go, too difficult to invest. And unfortunately, my industry, we're sheep-like. If somebody doesn't invest, it's as simple as this. The fund manager will get fired for investing in a hard-to-go country if it doesn't then work out well. But he won't get fired for investing in China or India, because everybody invests there. Okay, so unless and until more people invest in Tunisia, the amount of investment is not going to increase substantially. I think that's really what's holding the country back. Just on the political side, there's a basket of pro-business things that they can enact. There's controls on the ownership of companies above about $3 million. If that was increased from 51% to 75% or 100%, you get more international investment in the country. There were one or two other things, but I think it's just, at the moment, there's obviously a governance transition. As that works through, as long as there's stability and people then see the reality versus the perception, I think the country will benefit.
Tom, if I could just ask, David's indulge me for a moment. I think that you have hit one of the most key pieces, and that is creating a different perception. And so the question, Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us. And David, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, because the reality is our public-private partnership, the efforts that Ziad and his partner are taking, Tom, what he's just laid out, Daniela at IMF, and we will hear from Don, and we've worked very closely with OPIC. The reality is, it is how do you create this, how do you get the stickiness of a new message, a new reality that can help with your industry to create new opportunities? And David, you touched on the issue of Libya, and I'd like you to address this synergy, because that is also an opportunity. As Libya remains in a much more tumultuous transition, Tunisia creates these opportunities. So we've talked about the Europe and the North-South piece, but what about the East-West piece and how Tunisia can help drive that? But the issue is also, it is very much perception, and how do we get over this hurdle that Tunisia is either too small, or that Tunisia isn't a place you want to invest, or there's too much turmoil. I call it identifying roles and responsibilities of all the stakeholders. We're going into the G8 meeting and the Deauville Partnership. Tunisia is a member of the Deauville Partnership. So let's put it on the table. What would be attractive to somebody like David and CNN and NPR and others to create a new reality? What can we all do to help shape this new reality?
Well, I was told I was just going to be the moderator. I'm kidding.
Sorry, David.
As the sacrificial media lamb. No, it's a real problem. So this book comes out, Beyond War, and it's the subtitle's fuzzy, but it's really about focusing on economics is a much more effective way to stabilize the region and, from an American perspective, counter militancy instead of sort of military invasions and drone strikes. And I'm telling you, at Politics and Prose, I'll be completely blunt with you. I had a questioner get up and say, how can you say that there are moderates in any of these countries? Don't you realize that Islam is an inherently evil religion? And there's a huge perception problem in this country. You know, it's the media's fault. It's the right-wing websites, this kind of stuff. And it was frankly a sort of distressing experience the last few weeks on book tour. That said, I think it's vital for Tunisia to differentiate itself from its neighbors. The advantage of Tunisia is that it all started there. Americans know, that at least, and that the revolution began there. And it's the first time I think Tunisia is sort of part of the public consciousness in the United States, and that's a real opportunity. And I think whatever can be done to be a success story. I mean, it's hard in the news to get positive stories, to get editors interested in it. There's a joke in the news business, and I apologize, but it's literally called, if it bleeds, it leads. That means if there's mayhem and blood, that's what goes on the front page. Not, hey, look at this great North African country that's, finally slowly getting through its political transition. I guess I would pressure columnists like myself. We have more autonomy and can write positive things. We don't have to just do the straight news reports. And I would just sort of be dogged about getting out these numbers and statistics that show that Tunisia is different. Because right now, you talk to Americans and the entire Arab Spring is essentially the streets of Cairo. And that's all they think is happening. And and Libya is sort of seen as even worse. So not a great answer. We do have a responsibility. But I would just tell you to keep pushing, because I think so then after the talk at Politics and Prose, other people came up to me that were much quieter, and they said, oh, thank you so much. That was fascinating. And I didn't know that this other side existed. I didn't know that, and I apologize, it's a cliche, but I talked about young Tunisians wanting to work for Google and start their own high-tech startups. And that was shocking to Americans. So keep at it, because there's a sort of quiet group of Americans that want to hear a different narrative out of the region and out of Tunisia.
Can I just jump in there and say, I think part of the issue is that there is a cultural feature of the Middle East, which is you don't want to overly celebrate your successes for fear that somebody's going to come and take your business away. Okay? So what we have to do is create more role models for Western consumers in particular, that actually if you go to Tunisia, you can stay in hotels there that are just as nice as most of the hotels in New York. It's perfectly acceptable to wander around as you would do in Central Park, all the rest of it. Plus, you can buy and sell businesses and make a lot of money, and people do, and look at these examples of it. And at least then I think if the Western investor starts to see it's a lot more normal than people think. It's creating role models, I think.
Sure. And then, Don, sorry we've had you waiting so long. And maybe another unfair question. So OPIC has been charged to sort of, particularly in Tunisia and Egypt, to get American firms to invest in these countries. Is that a fair? You've been authorized to make a lot of loan guarantees and try to make this happen, but it's my understanding that it's been difficult to get firms to go in and do that. And one anecdote, and I apologize, the largest American business delegation ever, definitely to the Arab world, and well, probably let's just say to the Arab world, arrived in Egypt, in Cairo, on September 10th, 2012. Every big American Fortune 500 company you could think of. Unfortunately, on September 11th, 2012, the video that insulted the Prophet Muhammad went viral. So as the delegation was finishing its meetings and leaving, and they were actually impressed with their meetings with President Morsi and sort of eager to invest, as they were leaving the following day, there were protesters sort of scaling the walls of the U.S. Embassy. And it's incidents like that I've been told make your job very difficult in terms of large American firms investing in Tunisia and Egypt and other countries.
Thank you for that unfair question. And I'm delighted to be here today. I have one of my colleagues from our structured finance side here, and he will may be able to also contribute to the discussion. As I heard, it's a part of the discussion today, and as I was preparing to put maybe some things in perspective, I ran across something that indicated that as recently as 2009, Tunisia was ranked by the World Economic Forum as the most competitive country in Africa and the 40th worldwide, so that we have a sort of long. It was 37. Oh, well, okay, what I read was 40th actually. So a long, deep, sort of tradition and history of, sort of private enterprise at work. I also took a look at the most recent, which is at the end of February, Moody's and S&P downgrades of the Tunisian government debt, and they cited three factors. One was increased political instability. Second was further delays in adopting the new constitution and organizing elections, which are prerequisites for a sustainable economic recovery. And the third was likely continued deterioration of Tunisia's credit fundamentals. Now, that was 3 months ago. We now have a constitution that has at least been sort of proposed. We now have elections that are, if not scheduled, are anticipated to be at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, and sort of concrete sort of issues addressing what a private sector entity had considered the factors that sort of contributed to reduced risk. So again, perspective of sort of a political upheaval, the revolution, and sort of the instability that occurs, and now getting sort of feet back on the ground and moving forward. I think from the United States standpoint, or at least our perspective on United States investors, I mean, Tunisia's historical relationship has been very much with the European community, and I think the numbers I've seen suggest 75 to 80% of the sort of trade, private sort of sector involvement goes sort of north-south in that way. I think the United States has, as a result, sort of a much smaller sort of foothold. I think that there are then what would be not so much cultural, but just sort of knowledge of the community, knowledge of the market that U.S. investors need to become aware of before they're sort of willing to invest. Now, we have, I'm sort of delighted to be at this table with two of the private equity funds in which OPIC has sort of financial sort of engagement and support. And what you'll see, and as you've heard from the gentleman speak, while they are sort of clearly investing in Tunisia and believe it has a promising future, they also are able to invest sort of across sort of broader parts of Africa and their private equity funds, and will search for sort of the opportunities that make sense from a basically risk reward standpoint, and it's something that we sort of strongly encourage. I think with respect to your question, maybe more directly on Tunisia, we as part of the administration and its sort of policy of supporting sort of the Arab Spring and the countries that have been sort of transitioning are sort of hugely interested in supporting from sort of Jordan to Morocco, and I probably left out sort of countries including Tunisia, private sector projects in those countries. I mean, for those of you who maybe should have started with this, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation is the U.S. government's development finance institution, and we are charged with, and our mission is to mobilize U.S. capital and skills to support development objectives in countries throughout the world, consistent with the foreign policy objectives of the United States. So when sort of President Obama and Secretary Clinton and now Secretary Kerry sort of indicate that economic opportunity in sort of North Africa and the Middle East is a priority of the administration. That's something that we, as part of the administration, sort of take to heart. I would say that in Tunisia there is a sort of active financing that we are sort of engaged in, and this is it's the Tunisian sort of franchising and small and medium enterprise loan guarantee facility. It's a $50 million facility that we are sort of working to get sort of rolled out. I know that in our sort of internal pipelines, we have been approached. I'll give sort of an example: a world-class hotel operator that wants us to participate with an investment guarantee for what would be a sort of first-class hotel in Tunis. I would say that getting to the sort of issues of what would prevent the private sector from getting engaged, and in part, we in some ways follow the private sector. We are sort of demand-driven. We will get approached by folks who want to have a project or projects in particular countries, and we can provide financing, whether it be an investment guarantee or sometimes direct loans, and we will offer political risk insurance, which sort of clients can also find very attractive. So I hope that was partially responsive to your question.
It was great. And I'm going to open up to the questions, but first I wanted to ask Ambassador Chowshi, do you have anything you'd like to say about, I guess, more you'd like to see from the private sector in the U.S. or more from the U.S. government, or any topic you'd like to comment on?
Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Big thanks to the Aspen Institute for initiating this occasion of gathering, talking about Tunisia. I won't be long, just to highlight three thoughts. One is that, in my opinion, there is a sharp improvement of the situation in Tunisia since the getting in of the new government, which has laid down a clear program of priorities, on top of which is security. Security, I was there 1 month ago, and I could see firsthand how security has sharply improved from what it was a few weeks or few months before that. I think there is some amplification of the message by media, whether local or international. The situation, when you read it in the media, I don't think that is quietly what the media would like it to be. And I would very much encourage potential investors in the United States, all people, but namely and especially investors, to go to Tunisia, for them to have the message firsthand and to see what Tunisia is today, and not to take it from what the media are saying. As Mr. Tom said, you can go to banks, you can go to hotels, wherever you go, situation is calm, situation is normal, and you do normal business. Obviously, there is some particular situation in some places of Tunisia, but that does not make of Tunisia an insecure place. Security has very much improved in Tunisia these last weeks. Second, I think with the Arab Spring that has ignited in Tunisia, we are in the presence of a historical evolution that is making of the situation in Tunisia, Egypt, and other countries an exceptional situation that is breaking up with old regimes, with old systems, and that situation has all the merits and all the particulars of a historical one that needs to be looked at as an exceptional situation that needs exceptional solutions, exceptional remedies, and exceptional formulas of assistance. Tunisia and other Arab Spring countries clearly need broad support from outside, apart from what Tunisia can do on its own. Tunisia, by the way, is undertaking many reforms, fiscal one, investment one, and banking one, not to mention others. So I think that we are in that situation where we deserve that the international community, Western countries, including the United States, could think about bringing a major support so that we can make of that transition in Tunisia a success story. It has the ingredients. There are many factors that militate for success in Tunisia, but we need very badly that major, substantial, big support from the outside so that we can bring in the revival of the economy, and you know how much the link is strong between economy and political situations, so that we can get over that last part of the transition process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Questions? Anyone would like to ask any questions? Here in the back.
Hi, I'm Mona Yakubian from the Stimson Center. My question is about prospects for regional integration and trade as both across North Africa, I think Tony sort of alluded to it a bit, and also South-South trade. I think in some ways the hope in Europe is a bit misplaced when one realizes that the unemployment rate in Spain is higher than that in Morocco. It strikes me that really North Africa's future is going to be much more really about the extent to which it's able to integrate both regionally and frankly much more broadly across the Arab world and also between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So I'd be curious as to the panel's thoughts about that, prospects for greater economic cooperation, trade liberalization, and what more can be done to promote that. Thank you.
Yeah, David, can I take this one?
Of course.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent question, and unfortunately, I mean, Tunisia has mainly been looking to Europe, as Don was mentioning, and Tunisia has forgotten about Africa, which for us, and that was actually the inception of our group. I mean, Tuna Invest, Africa Invest, we started in Tunisia. Then we said, I mean, the Tunisian company cannot evolve, cannot remain sustainable if they don't grow outside of Tunisia to tap to the other markets. And that's why we went to North Africa to start with, and then to Sub-Saharan Africa. I think Tunisia, I mean, will have to look not only to Europe, because we're part of the Mediterranean Sea. So, I mean, Europe will remain a major party vis-a-vis, I mean, on the economic and trade side. But also, we have to have a clear policy towards Africa. Unfortunately, North Africa, there are some political issues that, I mean, it's not the Tunisian fault. I mean, I think Tunisia has been trying for a long time, I mean, to make the Maghreb a reality. Unfortunately, I mean, it's not the case on the political side, but on the economic side, things are happening. I mean, we have a lot of companies that are investing in Algeria, in Libya, even in Morocco. And that's, I mean, our belief is that those companies, and one of the questions was about the market and the size of the market, is that many of the companies and the companies that even Tom's fund has invested in, these are companies that are deriving most of their turnover outside of Tunisia, because Tunisia remains a highly competitive place. I mean, even though we are in 6 countries now in Africa, our base remains in Tunisia because we have the best, we can get the best people at the best price, basically. I mean, Tunisia remains a very highly competitive place, not only, I mean, to hire engineers, but also to make goods and make things. I mean, I've been to most of the countries in Africa, and Tunisia is one of the most competitive ones. So even if maybe we've lost some ranking on the competitiveness side, I mean, I think we still remain a highly competitive country. So yeah, but that has also to come from the political side. I think there has to be a clear strategy like what Morocco has been trying to do. I mean, to look sub-Saharan Africa, and Tunisia has to do that. There is a willingness. We've been discussing also with some politicians, I mean, in Tunisia to help us, I mean, in sub-Saharan Africa. Some are starting to listen, and maybe I take the opportunity of His Excellency being here to convey this message and try to do even more, because we've invested there. I mean, through our investment, we brought a lot of Tunisian expertise, and I can tell you that Tunisia has a very good image in sub-Saharan Africa. So I think that could be one of the main focus for Tunisia for the coming years. But unfortunately, the Maghreb, as I said, I mean, has not happened yet, and we hope that things will evolve on the political side. So it will happen. I mean, we have a large country between us that is not willing, or not the only country. There are 2 of them, but hopefully things will happen. And what we say is that on the economic side, we should help. I mean, as a private sector, to drive that move. I mean, and things are happening, but very, very, very slowly.
Danielle or Tom, do you see those kind of opportunities in terms of not looking at Europe but looking south?
You know, it's an interesting question. If you could, I think if there was one takeaway from this meeting, by the way, on a policy maker level as to what would be the game changer for that region generally, North Africa, Middle East, it would be regional economic integration. You see, unemployment is not a post-Arab Spring issue in the Middle East. It's a pre-Arab Spring issue. And in fact, really, I think the Arab Spring was really driven by economic disenfranchisement rather than electoral. And the only solution is to somehow get this 350 million Arab consumer group into a common economic bloc, so that companies that are in one country can sell their muffins to countries in the neighbouring country and so on. Because on its own, Tunisia at 10 million people will need to, and it has done successfully, become a niche country, a bit like a Singapore or Dubai even. It's got some niche advantage, but generally for the whole region to step up, you need to link those economies together somehow, and there's no immediate sign of that happening, and that's the big shame, I think.
Very briefly, this is a very important issue, and I think I would like to second what Tom said in terms of this is a pre-Arab Spring issue. I think the Maghreb integration is something that has distinct economic benefits that are not being realized. My institution, the IMF, other institutions have been trying to support and advance a dialogue around the economic benefits from Maghreb integration way before the Arab Spring. The hope is that the Arab Spring will maybe help make some progress, but again, it's at this point, I'm afraid, it's still in the hope department.
Other questions? Yes, sir. Yes, go right ahead.
This question, I think, goes mostly to
Where are you from, sir?
I'm with Sabrin Group Incorporated. It's an investment bank in D.C. and Erbil and Cairo. And my name is Ashraf Sabrin. Sure. Business law, with regard to how things get done if something goes wrong, okay? That's a really big deal. It's easy to go and open an office. It's easy. It takes a few weeks. You can open an office, and you can define which sector you want to go into within a couple of months. But then when things go wrong, that's when the difficulty arises. Just as an example, and not to be negative about any particular country or anything, but because of the revolution, it could be more difficult to get your issue heard before a judiciary, and it has to do with business law, and the judiciary is not really trained in this aspect. Whereas if you have a problem in D.C., you know, it goes through the process very smoothly, very easily. You're familiar, your attorney is familiar, and you sit at a table and you work everything out. But in Tunisia, I'm not sure if it's the same way. The process in Egypt is more difficult because of the revolution. The laws were there before, and they were great, and we got a lot of attention. But then post-revolution, well, we have other things to take care of now, so we're not concerned with you. Now, how is that? Can you compare and contrast that with Tunisia?
Are you talking from facts or just a general question?
It's a general question. Oh, yeah, it's a general question. I mean,
okay.
In other words, how does business law look in Tunisia? No, I have no.
No, I thought that experience. You lived something already negative.
No, not yet.
Yeah, I mean, I hope never. No, I think when this because we're in the private equity business, so I mean, the rule of law is very important for us, and I think one of the nice things that we saw, I mean, after the revolution, is at least the rule of law will be there, and that our rights as an investor will be protected, because we're mostly minority investor, not only vis-a-vis our companies, but our partners coming from Europe and other places doing business in Tunisia. So on that side, I think things have improved and should improve even more. I mean, on applying really the laws and the regulation that exist within Tunisia. So on that side, I mean, we're much more positive than what it used to be, because before there were a lot of interference. I mean, with the local, with the the family of the former president, etc. Even I mean, in our business, I mean, there were a lot of interference, people coming and trying to seize things or to impose on us things. So on that side, and this is maybe based on our what we lived. I mean, we things have improved, and I'll let maybe.
This is going to be a little speculative, but one certainly important measures that the loan that the IMF has been discussing with the authorities and that we hope will be approved in a month or so, is in fact to improve the environment for private business by improving the regulations around investment and also by improving the way banks function. These two elements of, in a sense, market infrastructure for private sector development are parts of the reforms that we are trying to advance in the country. But of course, one key element, as Ziad was referring to, is that rule of law is not just good law, is also good law applied in a fair manner. And so strengthening the institution, strengthening the capacity of different parts of institution to implement the laws in a fair, non-arbitrary manner is also going to be critically important. And Tony mentioned the Deauville Partnership, and institution building is very much one of their priorities. So I think there are a lot of different institutions and people out there trying to advance precisely this agenda.
And Don, do you want to talk about your experience with the Tunisian Judiciary?
Well, I will say that we don't have much because we really haven't gotten sort of projects off, sort of off the line. What I guess I would also say is within the architecture, sort of the U.S. government, our focus is not on, sort of rule of law improvements, and that is largely, sort of within the domain of USAID or, the State Department, may get involved. And I actually recall reading something, sort of this morning or over the weekend about some funding that has gone in for, that supports the American Bar Association, sort of rule of law, sort of initiative. I think it's the World Justice Project rule of law initiative for, sort of training of judges and lawyers as all part of this, sort of institution building. I would say that, we have not heard, sort of instances of, and I'll say sort of systematic, adverse, sort of judicial resolutions that, sort of give us pause as we, sort of think about Tunisia and supporting investments there.
Great, thank you. And Tony wanted to add one thing.
Mona brought up and picked up on a point that I was referencing, and it's now come back a couple of times, so I'd like to be a little bit more clear. First of all, the PNB North Africa partnership. On the NAPEO part, the North Africa Maghreb part, this was very much meant to be a regional initiative focusing on the political, economic, and trade relationships of North Africa. It predates. It was an initiative that began in the first term of the Obama administration, in which we have partnered with our colleagues at the State Department, and predates the Arab Revolution that began in Tunisia. But I would like to reference, I think it's very important for us to sort of do a little bit of a sea change. Number one, we can't look at this region, whether it's North Africa or the broader Middle East and the security architecture, as we used to. And we've just seen what happened with al-Qaeda in North Africa, and the focus of the criticality of stabilizing and how we address that security piece. It's the interconnection of the political and economic piece and creating new pathways. And in that regard, I think Mona's point in terms of not looking so much to Europe, you're right, correct, Ziad, that Tunisia will always have Europe as her traditional trade partner. But I think as you look at new opportunities and truly growth opportunities, as you yourself have identified and a number of the panelists have identified, it's more in a regional context, either in also broader regional context, and Africa. Additionally, I think I would like to suggest that the context of the public-private partnership that we've been talking about is that you can incentivize and take the various pieces, whether it's the IMF framework agreement, OPIC's political risk insurance, the franchising initiative that is very much, I think it's, we have to remember this franchising and small and medium-sized businesses are the backbone of growth, and we need to put more effort into this initiative. There is, I think we need to, if we can come up with more creative ways of incentivizing some of that regional cooperation in a private sector context, you can create some incentives for governments to open up. As opposed to the more traditional government-to-government negotiations, which will continue. But maybe if you have a real interesting project, they will see the carrot and why it is in their collective interest to create more regional open trade relationships. So I'd just like to reference that. One final point, because David, you mentioned the trade delegation, and one of our colleagues was on that delegation. But here at the Aspen Institute, on September 12th, we hosted a dinner focusing on North Africa and hospitality and tourism. And I'm very proud to say it was hosted by Secretary Albright. All of the regional ambassadors came, including the Libyan ambassador, and a number of very important private sector people. And they reaffirmed their commitment to this region. There is an enormous opportunity, but as you have pointed out, you need stability and security and clarity especially. But the hospitality industry is an industry that is usually the one that will be out front early, especially the cruise line industry. And that can lead infrastructure if we look, which is where an OPIC can come into play, especially on obviously the U.S. side. So I'd like to just put that on the table for further discussion, for further discussion points, and to remind us, yes, I mean, for those of us who've been involved in this region, it's a region of incredible opportunity, but some unevenness, and you just have to stay the course. It's a marathon, not a short term, not a sprint.
Great, thank you. Another question? Yes, sir, on the right.
Hello, good morning, and thanks to the Aspen Institute for having us. This is a fantastic opportunity to discuss a region that is in a great time of opportunity, and definitely looking forward to development. I was there a month ago, and just on the point of security, I did notice that there has been an increase in security and just kind of confidence in the streets. Just things have been kind of more calm than rather, let's say, a year or two ago. My question is pertinent or relevant to, the overqualification of the workforce in Tunisia. Is there a way, this would be directed either to Tom or Ziad, is there a way that we can maybe utilize the human resources that we have? I mean, for example, I have uncles that, have PhDs or masters, and, for example, students that are just coming out and wanting to go elsewhere. Is there a way that we can maybe use this foreign direct investment and maybe have you guys look at how to utilize maybe students, give them internships or things like that, or are you just bringing in kind of your intellect?
It's a great question.
Yeah, I don't think there is overqualification, but I think, what the universities are providing as degrees are not aligned with the needs of the country, and that's why we've been working a lot, especially as a private sector, to maybe put in place some vocational training, type of training in order to train people or from one sector to another, because that's basically the problem of Tunisia. And actually, we were even discussing about bringing some other models of education in Tunisia in order to adapt, the needs of the market to what the universities are bringing out to the market. The U.S. could be one of them, but also we're discussing the German model, which is much closer, to the needs of especially the industries where Tunisia has specialties. So all that is going on, but this has been done on the private sector. Hopefully, I think it's not yet part of the priorities of the government. They have been dealing with some issues like securities, etc., but it will be coming. So, yeah, that's something where maybe we will be needing funds as Tunisia to put in place such programs.
Anything to add or no?
I would just give an example of a company we have in Egypt, does IT. They can't find people to work for them. Isn't that extraordinary in a country that's got so many millions of unemployed people? So this whole point about vocational training It's a huge gap in the market. And there are great NGOs out that educate for employment. I think it's called E4E. There you go. It was a good plug. But the private sector has to lead. There has to be some model we have to come up with whereby the private sector pays for the education. And we just haven't quite worked out the model yet. But everything has to be private sector solved ultimately. That's the key, I think.
And I just want to take one more question. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks very much. Larry Sperling from State Department's Global Partnership Initiative. We're the public part of the public-private partnership, and I want to thank Aspen and the panelists for coming together for what has been a really enlightening discussion. My question is this: given the current opportunities for trade with Europe, the potential opportunities for Maghreb east to west trade, if you will, and potential opportunities both for internal growth and south-south trade. What are the sectors that provide the most opportunity currently for investment, and of those, which of those have the greatest potential for job creation? And I recognized Tony pointed out the tourism and hospitality industry, which I agree is very important. But I'm curious, are there others that stand out that present the greatest opportunities, both for growth and for maximizing job potential?
Thanks. Would you like to, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the sectors that we think are attractive are often sectors that are attractive in other similar markets, include production in pharmaceuticals, and we've got 2 pharmaceutical production facilities there. Why? We like to deal with the consumer ultimately, right? So we try and avoid dealing with the government wherever we can. Pharmaceutical production is a local business often, because you can get cost benefits from producing and distributing locally in these markets. So, and you've got hospital offtake, etc. So that's an interesting sector. FMCG generally, in all of these markets, and Tunisia, by the way, is growing at 3.5% probably at the moment. It's really a 4.5% economy. It's got a good demographic base, so it's young people coming into the consuming class. You have to create jobs for them as well, but there are more people buying everything from diapers to toothpaste to shoes. It's just a immutable fact. More people are being born every year. And so anything that you can sell into that sort of distribution channel and space, it's everything from food to Nike trainers to McDonald's hamburgers. And, you know, lo and behold, these companies should be here selling more of that type of stuff. It can be a low-cost producer for Europe, like Eastern Europe was immediately after the fall of the wall. As I said, we have a company that produces plastics for the auto industry, the electrical industry, the aeronautics industry, all in Europe. Tourism is always going to be a key economic driver. I think there's this constant competition with Morocco, and Tunisia has to get its act together so that the tourist from Europe doesn't go to Morocco instead. I think logistics is an industry that enables a lot of all the other ones, so we like that. Healthcare.
Great. I know you're all very busy. I want to finish up right on time at 12:30. First of all, thank you, Tony, for hosting this event. It was wonderful. I really appreciate it. Daniela, Tom, Ziad, and Don, thank you so much. And Ambassador, I really appreciate. One thing you said, Ambassador, that I think just to sum up, Tunisia is doing much better. There's good progress politically. There's better security. The economy is sort of stabilizing. And then from an American perspective, this was actually a speech given by a State Department official recently called Diplomacy in the Age of Austerity. It was Assistant Secretary Fernandez. What can the U.S. do, to be blunt, that doesn't cost money? The ambassador talked about coming up with exceptional solutions in an exceptional time, and I think we all need to think creatively. Aspen is trying to encourage us to do that. There's been some great ideas, game changer being a regional economic integration, simple ideas like educate for employment, and just the encouragement things we're hearing from the private sector here. So thank you all so much for coming, and hopefully this will lead to more investment in Tunisia. Thank you.